Geek. Talking baseball every week. Because they're Gleeman and the Geek.
And welcome to Gleeman and the Geek. Happy New Year edition. I'm John Bonus. Twins Daily with me, Aaron Gleeman at The Athletic.
New Year, same nothing.
That's
for the Twins.
That's not a bad title for the podcast.
Yeah, okay. There we go. We're done. Okay. That's our new for 2024.
Well, we do actually have, I mean, there's always a slow time around Christmas to New Year's in Major League Baseball,
Sure.
period, right? The fact that it was preceded by 2.5 months of nothing beforehand makes it a little bit, maybe a little bit more significant.
We do this show basically, I think in 2024, the goal for each episode is we'll go until we stumble across a phrase that we like for the title of the episode.
Is that the way it's going to
If
work?
it happens a half hour in, then
That's
the
right.
show's a half hour.
That's right.
That's when happened
So real
30
quickly,
seconds
here's our
in.
sponsors.
Yeah. Thank you to the Twins. Although I will say, there's been quite a few, like there's Chris Sale trade and signing. There was, if you set the Frankie Montas sign, we'll go over all the Giolito sign. There's a lot of interesting stuff. There's been some trades. If you separate the Twins from the rest of MLB, I think the perception of MLB's offseason is not that it's been, wild and crazy like a NBA or NFL offseason where it all happens in a weekend, basically.
Right.
But it's been fairly active before and after the holidays, I would say. And so the Twins are just so, even by their standards, which their standards are to be slow always, even when they have money to spend and holes to fill.
They tend to wait out the market and see what comes their way.
But they've essentially done nothing except for about a week ago, they signed a reliever named Josh Staumont, a former Royals, spent 5 years in the Royals bullpen. The Twins know him very well. He's thrown, I think, 20 career innings against the Twins, which is a lot for a reliever. So we're going to talk about him.
Right.
They also yesterday claimed another right-handed reliever named Ryan Jensen off waivers, which normally, I'm going to be honest, in an active time period, that would be, we would 3 minutes.
We would still cover it.
Yeah, but barely. So we'll do, 40, 45 minutes on Ryan Jensen's waiver claim. No, we'll do, 4 minutes instead of 2 minutes on Ryan Jensen and talk about how that sort of fits their MO of late, or this regime's MO with bullpen building and all that stuff. But so there's some
just Josh Staumont.
Yes, that's just Staumont. I agree with that. And then the center field market has clarified itself a little bit since our last free episode, which was like 10 days ago or 12 days ago.
We spent a fair amount of time on the 22nd, started talking about the names that were still left there and debating which way we thought the Twins would do, whether or not they would sign a free agent. And
yes, I fear we were correct, or I was. Not that you thought they definitely would sign one, but what we debated at the time or argued about at the time was I was saying I don't think they're going to sign anybody.
No, I actually thought they would. I thought that was the least likely. I think. Right.
It's okay to admit you were,
but John,
it's okay
I thought they would trade somebody.
Well, that's still possible. Yes, it's okay to admit you were wrong. It's actually encouraged when I'm right. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need you to admit when you're wrong when it's you and Chrissy arguing, but when it's me and you, I encourage you to admit you're wrong. And I would discourage you from saying you're right, just because it comes across poorly, I am right now. But I don't mind that because I just like to be right. So yeah, we got some news and notes to talk about. A few. I don't know. Tree's been shook a few times, at least for the MLB offseason, and so we can react to some of that stuff. We also just wanted to say, because this is our first episode of the new year, I'm old as hell now.
Aaron just had his
John
41st birthday.
Yes, well, don't tell people that. I'll never be cast in a leading role now.
I mean, my birthday present to you was not tweeting out happy 49th birthday to you, Aaron Gleeman. My usual birthday gift to people is
I'm old enough now where it's hard to tell if it's a joke when you say I'm 50 or not.
Exactly. Yeah,
because for years I got to say like happy 90th, and people are like, he's not 90, is he? Could be. I don't know. So yeah, it's a new year. We're always. We won't go super into it because I tweeted out some of the numbers already. But for those of you not on Twitter or who have me muted on Twitter, which I wouldn't blame you. I know John.
Or those of you that he's blocked on Twitter.
That too. Yeah. Yeah. Mostly, I'm a muter. Mostly, not a blocker.
I'm a blocker.
Yeah, John's
Aaron's
a blocker.
Muter, yeah.
If you've been blocked by me on Twitter, you earned it. because I'll just mute, if it's up for debate. But you lovely people hearing this are not the sort that I would do that. We are always pretty, upfront, whether you guys need it or want the information or not, about our audience and the growth of the show and just sort of the state of the show we like to do either at the end of the year or the beginning of the new year, in part because we're proud of it, in part because it's something we talk about a lot between the two of us because we're both – it's important to us just from a business standpoint, but also – we've been interested in this topic for 15, 20 years, which is, the kind of how to grow an independent media thing, how to get eyes on something, how to, once you do get some eyes on it, how to kind of turn that into something bigger. And also, the last time I talked about this was with Jay Bowler from the Racket, which is a great independent publication, which kind of replaced City Pages.
I need to talk to them.
And we kind of feel the same way, which is they always write a thing at the end of each year, and they say, "Here's what happened this year."
Yeah.
They're a little bit more.
It's very good.
They're even more kind of revealing than we are because they'll be
fantastic.
Like, "Here's every penny of what we made."
Yeah.
We're not going to go into that, but we'll get close to that. And I think it's important for us, but more important for like people who are thinking about trying something like this themselves. Whether it's on a bigger scale, a smaller scale, somebody, sports media specifically, or just media in general, it's a tough time. There are a lot of very good people getting fired from very good jobs with no clear alternative kind of landing spot. And that's unfortunate. And what happens to a lot of those people is they say, what if I start my own thing?
Right.
And so we like to talk about this stuff as a way to kind of, I wouldn't say encourage them. It's a decision you got to make for yourself if you're in that situation, but to kind of give you as much information as possible because this is something we would have found valuable, 12 years ago when we were like, should we do a podcast? Right. If there had been a local podcast that just said, here's our numbers, here's how we grow. So anyway, that's a lot of build up to what is probably only interesting to us.
Let me just add to that as well, which is I think there is a value in demonstrating to corporate media the sort of non-traditional media that ends up thriving when in in what is perceived to be a rocky, unforgiving landscape. You know what I mean? Like if the fact that people do want to talk about things. I mean, we've certainly seen Twins broadcasts and media and such move in the direction that the blogs were 15 or 20 years ago. The same topics that we were writing about that people were like, what? That were taboo.
No,
I think in corporate media.
First they ignore, then they mock, and then they become.
Yeah, that's right. And we've seen that movement. And the more that we sort of demonstrate, listen, there's a market out here for this, even beyond trying to encourage other people to do this sort of thing or so on, but also just trying to tell the people who are making decisions and the people who are afraid that the market can't possibly support this thing, even though they already have a market, they have that sort of reach into, they have a television station, they have a radio station. We want to be able to demonstrate to them, hey, this is something that you guys, this is acceptable stuff.
And this is something
and people will support it.
We've literally been trying to show non-independent media, like, mainstream media or, normal media, whether associated with the Twins, associated with local broadcast outlets in Minnesota, or just in general. It's been a decade-plus long struggle.
2 decade plus.
Yeah, really.
I mean, it was 2002.
Yeah. I mean, at the beginning, we didn't have much to convince them of because we didn't have much. But yes, to show them, I mean, we've had conversations with Twins employees where they'll be like, what are you guys getting on podcasts? About 2,000 people listening? And we'll be like, last episode had 18,000 downloads. And they'll be like, what now? And they're always shocked. 20 years later, they're shocked. And I'm not saying they're shocked by how good our numbers are. It's more because, our numbers are good for what they are, but they're not, we're not some massive podcast or something on a wider scale. Sure. They're just shocked at like what the scale of it is. Right. And that's kind of what you were talking about. And it's a struggle, whether it's with advertisers, whether it's with the Twins themselves, whether it's with, radio stations and television stations and magazine outlets and stuff. We like to put the numbers out there because, first of all, we think our numbers are good, but even if they're not good, to just say, let's make no mistake, here's the numbers. And it's always I don't know. It's nice when people are surprised by them because it's usually in a positive way, like, wow. But I would rather people weren't surprised by them. Right. I would rather more people were upfront about it. And I know that can come across as like, bragging a little bit. And sometimes John has to talk me into it, like showing the Patreon subscriber count. You can do math on that.
That's a really good example of what was that. Nobody shows that, but we show that because we want everybody to understand there's a market for this, right?
So anyway, with that out of the way, let's just go over the numbers very quickly because we continue to be blown away in year 13 of us doing this podcast?
I guess we started we'll be approaching the 13th anniversary in August.
Okay. So yeah, 13 years.
Yeah.
That's a long time, John. That's my longest relationship.
We're at 12 years and 4 months, something like that. Yeah. That's gonna make Judy very sad.
I don't consider my mother a relationship. I don't know what kind of thing you had going on there, John, but okay. Hi, Judy. It was a great year for us.
Yeah.
For the Twins.
Right.
I think for this fan base, more importantly, of which we consider ourselves part of.
Right.
We talked about this during the little playoff run they were on, but, a lot of the things that I think kind of loomed over this fan base, the dark cloud aspect of this stuff, the cap, the ceiling that was on the enjoyment of this franchise,
right?
That was not an active thing that people placed on it, but just sort of a feeling that loomed of, yeah, they're leading the division, but they haven't won a playoff game in 20 years,
right.
Or playoff series in 20 years. So who cares? Well, that's gone now, and it wasn't removed because they won the World Series. That would have been great. But it was removed, and we've talked about this for years now, which is all we've wanted as Twins fans or people who cover the Twins, whatever you want to call us, is the chance to, critique and analyze and praise and criticize a team as a normal baseball team. Yeah, right. That's all we've wanted. So that when they make a signing in late January, we can say, they probably overpaid for this guy, or, ooh, that was a really nice trade, or, wow, I can't believe they did that, without the reaction of half the fan base being,
how are they going to win in October?
Yeah, who cares? They haven't won anything in 20 years. And so I think now that that's gone, in a way, it places a little, like a different sort of pressure on them now.
I hope so. You would think so.
But
they don't seem to be reacting that way.
Yeah, that's a good thing you would think.
Right.
But so
speaking of ending the streak, what did you think of the Winter Meltdown design?
It's a good design. John sent me, the Winter Meltdown.
I'm not going to describe it because we're going to unveil
it.
What is that,
in about 3 weeks now?
Three. Yeah. So listen, starting Monday, I think we'll start doing a lot of details about the Winter Meltdown. If you are not, if you have been to it in the past, which I think thousands of you have, right?
Well, for sure.
Right? Yeah, right. It will be January 27th. You'll be able to watch Twins Daily for the updates on that. And if you haven't been it, you're going to want to try it. So.
But so anyway,
Brock outdid himself on the design this year again. So go. Sorry.
This show, which we call the free show, you could also call it the original show. It's available on Apple and Spotify and wherever you get your podcasts. Right. You don't pay for it. It's advertiser supported, all that stuff. Right. It's what you're listening to right now. That was up in terms of downloads per new episode that we put out, because we put out a few fewer episodes this year than in the past. Up 11% compared to the previous year, and up 36% compared to 2 years prior.
Okay, good.
And that's good, but it's also good because
what was the number? 14?
14,000, almost 15,000.
Okay, wow,
per new episode. And we've talked about this in the past. Like, we've had years that grew more than 11%, previously. Right. I mean, the year before obviously grew like 20-something. But at some point, there's a diminishing return.
Right.
Because while we have many non-Twins fans who listen to this, relatively speaking, it's mostly Twins fans who listen to this, and mostly Minnesotans who listen to this. Although it's closer to 50-50 maybe.
Right.
But, there isn't an endless pool of people who have any possibility of subscribing to a Minnesota Twins podcast. So at some point, when you start to get to 15,000 people per episode, which is incredible, like really, we're blown away by that. 11% year over year growth is pretty damn good, even though we've had years bigger than that. But it's harder to grow 25% when you're already at 15,000.
Right.
So we're very proud of that. What we call the Patreon show.
I assure you, it's more than the number of season tickets that the Twins have.
Oh, yeah, that's fascinating. Well, we've had this conversation with Twins. Yes, it is. Their season ticket base, I'm not certain what it is like as of today, but as of a few months ago.
It certainly did not, I don't think, get the... Well, I'll be interested to see so they usually have a media luncheon on January 26th, on the Friday before, just of Twins Fest, where one of the things they talk about is, how things are going, and one of the things that they have said in the past is, here's our season ticket base. It's usually a question that's asked of Dave St. Pierre.
Yes.
It'll be interesting to see where that level is, because I expected a big bump this year, and I think this offseason and the television contract and all of that has probably dampened that significantly.
Absolutely. And that's part of what we talked about 2 months ago when it was clear they were going to lower the payroll and it was clear they were going to have a relatively slow, perhaps we didn't know this slow offseason. We said, first of all, we just think it's illogical from a monetary standpoint when you're owned by billionaires. But even setting that aside, you're halting all momentum. You're cutting yourself off at the knees. Right. You're limiting the impact of what should have been, like we just said, a special
season. They may have
an
11% growth. I don't know. Maybe they did. We don't.
True. Yeah. So the Patreon show, which you could call the paid show, which is $1 per episode for subscribers. It's kind of a private members only club. Right. We curse on there occasionally.
Yes.
Sometimes we'll say stuff that we might not say on the free show.
When Josh Staumont signed, we had a semi-emergency podcast and then did an hour of mailbag questions.
We do a lot of mailbag. We'll probably be doing one of those like next Wednesday or something. That one was up 33%. Year over year in terms of paid subscribers.
Wow.
And 64% compared to 2021.
Wow.
Now, if we continue to have a 33% annual growth on that podcast, we will be living in a mansion on Mars with Elon Musk. No. So we're at we ended the year with about 4,000 paying subscribers on the Patreon.
Yeah.
Our original goal for that was 200.
Exactly.
Not 200,000, 200 people, 200 people.
Yeah.
100 and then another 100. That's 200. Yeah. And then I would say our sort of initial goal was to get like 2,000 people.
Right.
And we've grown essentially 1,000 people since last year at this time.
Goal is even saying that. Our initial dream would have been like,
really.
Right? Yeah, right.
So I say all this for all the reasons we just described, but the real reason is to say thanks. And I know we thanked you guys on the last episode, and we'll get to some Twins talk here in a minute. But, first of the year, people get into moods, especially when you get older. That's on true. January 3rd. January 3rd, I was discussing this. Dan Hayes' sister's birthday is also January 3rd.
Really?
Happy birthday to, I forgot her first name. But whatever. Miss Hayes. I don't think she's Hayes anymore. And we were debating.
She's trying to separate herself from Dan as much as possible.
So would I.
Like the rest of us.
So would I. Yeah. Me especially. How about an empty chair between us? Would that work? No. We were debating what the worst days of the year to have your birthday. And I argued that December 26th is horrible.
Okay. Even worse than December 25th.
Well, yeah. I mean, like literal December 31st, Jan 1, that's pretty bad. And Christmas Day is pretty bad. But the day after each of those, Jan 2.
Yeah.
But I put January 3rd, which is my birthday. Top 10 worst or bottom 10 worst days to have a birthday.
Probably.
Especially because it comes on the heels.
4th of July.
Yeah, but from I'm thinking when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Now, I don't care about my birthday at this point.
Right.
Like I tell everyone, don't give me anything. I haven't had a birthday party in 10 years. You guys won't surprise you guys.
I offered to take you out for lunch.
You did, yeah.
Becky made the Gleeman of the Geek credit card.
Yeah. You can pay 50% of your own birthday lunch, you schmuck. I turned that down. Becky made 3 different dinner reservations, and I was like, what if we just get some takeout? I watched the Wolves game.
Where was the takeout?
We got World Street Kitchen.
Oh, I love World
Special event because we only get that like twice a week anyway. Or I only get that like twice. But anyway, it's bad because nobody cares about it because it's coming right after New Year's. But also, when I was a child and I cared about birthdays and presents, whether it's Christmas or Hanukkah,
there's a huge hangover by that.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
And so my family would be like, "Here's your Christmas/Hanukkah present." They're not prepared to get you another meaningful present 7 days later or whatever it is. It's like, well, who's doing that? Yeah. You don't get a PlayStation on the 25th and a Xbox on January 3rd. You're not. That's not happening to you. So anyway, it's bad. But anyway, my point on the numbers is to thank you guys. We are constantly having to adjust our goals or expectations or, like you said, dreams on this stuff because we have blown so far past what our feeble minds could have imagined as a ceiling to this thing. And I'm constantly saying, as I just did, well, there's got to be a cap on this. There are only so many Twins fans. There are only so many people willing to pay to hear us talk, mostly because our two spouses or significant others say that, some version of that.
Like,
I can't believe there's but I love to be proven wrong.
And not in a, boy, am I lucky kind of way.
No. We were watching TV yesterday, and she literally said, "Just watch. You don't have to comment on everything." She literally.
Oh no!
By the way, this was the day after my birthday.
Oh no!
So the bloom was off the rug. She was like, not everything needs a joke attached to it." While we were watching, I don't even remember what we were watching. Something stupid where I'm just like, every mention, everything it has to be a joke.
That's not a good sign.
You know me.
Speaking of blowing past expectations, how about them Twins?
Yeah,
that's my segue.
Oh, well, they haven't
to Josh Staumont.
Oh, well, the only other. Before we get to that. Oh yeah, I'm done with the numbers. So if you didn't care about that, I'm sorry. Little update on Joe Mauer.
Oh yeah,
which we've kind of been tracking.
That is sort of blowing past expectations.
Yes, that's what I thought you were kind of going for.
Okay, yeah,
I'll give you credit. No. I looked today. Ryan Thibodeau is a guy who tracks this on Twitter and Hall of Fame tracker. Which basically all he does. I saw Lavelle was like fighting with him on Twitter. Lavelle's stance, because you could count on Lavelle to take the weirdest stance on anything. You know what I mean? Like pitchers should not receive MVP votes, even though pitchers free. Yeah. All this guy's doing, he's providing a service of he's reading everyone's individual columns that they write, media members. Which I'll almost guarantee Lavelle's written in the past. Here's my Hall of Fame vote for this year. Right. And he's just grouping them together and saying, here's the numbers on it, because people want to track it. And Lavelle's like, I don't think we should be tracking this. I think it does a disservice to the people voting. And I just want to scream, so keep it a secret and he can't track it. Nobody is saying to media members.
Right, yeah, that's fair. Right, yeah.
Like Dan Hayes has a ballot, and Dan Hayes just posted a picture of his ballot on Twitter.
Yeah.
And some of the athletic writers who vote for the Hall of Fame write a little column about it.
Sure.
Ken Rosenthal wrote us today.
Right, yes.
And he was like, here's why I voted Chase Utley into the Hall of Fame, but not, I don't know, A-Rod or whoever it was. And people read it. You don't have to do that. You don't have to tweet it. You can keep it completely a secret, and then they'll just reveal the ballot, and you don't have to fight with people, Lavelle. But I think they do a service, because here's my thing about journalism and media. As we just described with the numbers to the podcast, which not many podcasters will just tell you, here's how many people listen to it. I'm for transparency. I'm for, if you're voting for something that people perceive as important, as silly as that sounds, people think the Hall of Fame is very important within this context. If you've been given a ballot and you're placing your vote and it's not discouraged to tell people what your vote is, you should damn sure, if you consider yourself a member of the media, and you want to be trustworthy and you want to be transparent. And by the way, you want sources and players to be trustworthy and transparent when you ask them questions. You should damn sure post it. Right. And then why wouldn't we track it? And so anyway, that's a long way of saying on Twitter, they track it. I think his name is not Mr. Thibs or something. I don't know. Anyway, they've estimated that about 32% of all ballots, known ballots, there's like, I don't know, 600 people who vote for it or something like that. So there's roughly 200 ballots are in, are known kind of precincts reporting. And Joe Mauer, as of this morning, has 83% or 82%, 82 or 83% of the vote. Now you need 75% even. I don't know if they round up. That's an interesting question. I'm going to guess you have to actually have 75% of the vote to get into Cooperstown. And you might be saying, wow, if he's at 82 or 83% with almost a third of all ballots counted, won't he cruise in 75%?
Well,
here's the problem. The people who reveal their ballot,
right.
the non-Lavelles,
right.
I don't want to pick on Lavelle.
I don't know.
It's fun to do. Here's the thing. I do it in person, too. It's not like it's behind his back. I love Lavelle, but he's very easy to pick on. People say that about me, too. Probably not without the I love him part. But the problem is, if you consider this a problem, the people who are generally most likely to write a column about their ballot or post the picture on Twitter or just tell people who they voted for tend to be younger.
Right.
They skew more towards the mentality that I have for transparency. And those people tend to vote for more players in general. They tend to use all 10 or at least 8, 9, or 10 spots on their ballot. They don't just vote for one guy and leave the rest blank or whatever. And someone like Maurer is going to be viewed more favorably by a analytics leading group. So what I mean by all this is then the, let's say, 68, 70% of ballots that are unknown
could be skewed
are most likely going to skew less favorably towards Maurer specifically, but bigger picture, they're going to have fewer votes on them per ballot. And this has been borne out year to year, which is you need in general, but in terms of the tracking, if you're only at 75% exactly when they're done tracking, because the actual reveal is in like 2 weeks or something like that, you're never going to get into the Hall of Fame because the unrevealed ballots are always going to be a lower percentage because they vote for fewer people. Right. All of which is to say that 83% puts him in good position here, but it not so that you can feel...
It's not safe.
Right, it's not safe.
Would you know where he ranks in terms of like all the rest of the candidates on there? Like,
he's number 2 right now. He's tied with Todd Helton.
Okay, that's what
Adrian Beltre's at like 97% or something like that.
I saw at least one ballot that was just had Adrian Beltre. Yeah.
Oh, I saw one that left him off completely. And it's like, I hate that. But yeah, Todd Helton and Maurer are actually not dissimilar players. I'm not arguing like from a value standpoint, but they're high average left-handed hitters, played for only one team.
Yeah,
and whose careers were cut a little short. Maurer's more so than Todd Helton's, but Helton had some back problems at the end. He didn't get to 3,000 hits. He didn't get to all this stuff. So setting aside, I think there's some debate to be had about Coors Field and all that stuff. But I think much like Larry Walker, he's just a great player. So those two, and then the next was like Billy Wagner and Sheffield. Okay. Like at 78% or something like that. Yeah. This is Sheffield's last year on the ballot, so he's getting a push for people who are saying like, but he better get above 78% or else he ain't going to make it. But anyway.
Interesting.
So yeah, that would be a fun class, I guess. Adrian Beltre, Joe Maurer, and Todd Helton.
Fun thing to celebrate at Twins Fest.
Him getting in, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. So that's where Maurer is at. I would say there's a good chance he gets elected on the first ballot now, where I would have said it was a long shot. Right. And he is virtually assured, regardless of whether he finishes at 74% or whatever this year, of getting in next year. Because once you clear the 70% or even like the 60% threshold, you will then get people who are just sort of dogpiling on and being like, all right, put him in. Get him off the ballot. Put him in. He's getting in. So that's good because I think he's very deserved. Although there was a clip, our ombudsman, Greg Masterson, Twins Daily writer, who I have specifically instructed to stop making videos and posting them on Twitter, and I feel that's really only fueled that fire, shockingly. He found a clip from, it was like 2015, like almost 10 years ago or whatever, of us doing a podcast where, it might have been right when Maurer had the concussion, maybe? Okay. Something like that. Where I was like, ooh, I don't think he's going to get into the Hall of Fame now or something like that. I'm pretty sure. And he's like, I need you to apologize for saying that. Anyway, this is my half-hearted apology for that.
I mean, honestly, at this time last year,
I'm pleasantly surprised.
I wasn't sure that he would be getting the Hall of Fame.
I thought he would.
I had people ask me straight up, and I was like, I don't think he will.
Right. Even at the beginning of this, when he was placed on the ballot, I got asked by a lot of people. And my feeling was, don't count on it for a few years, but he will eventually get in. I thought it would be more of a 40% the first year, 50%, kind of little bit of growth. You get in year 4, year 5. And in fact, I said at the beginning, my genuine hope is that he gets in before I'm able to give him a vote, which will be in 6 years.
I think our perception was colored by the local coverage of Mauer after covering him for 20 years.
Absolutely.
I mean, from the day he was drafted, there was this guy?
Right. Well, first of all, the expectations placed on him were absurd.
Right, yes.
To the point that, and the reason I can prove this is he was the first catcher to win multiple batting titles. He won 3. He won an MVP. He made, 6 All-Star games. He won 5 Silver Sluggers, 5 Gold Gloves. And people, I think if you polled people like, it was a good career, but it wasn't quite. Well, if your expectations were higher than that, you're an insane person. Right, yeah. But then you toss in the injuries and the contract and all that stuff. And part of the optimism that we had that he would eventually get in, I didn't think it would be this year, certainly, was the idea of if you're not a Minnesotan and you haven't been living and dying by every Mauer-related thing for 20 years, if you're just some guy in Cincinnati or New York or Colorado and you're given a ballot and someone says either put a check or not next to his name for the Hall of Fame, all you think about Joe Mauer is, that guy could effing hit, huh?
Yeah, right. 3
batting titles, all the accolades. I just said, of course he's a Hall of Famer. You don't think, well, he was overpaid his last 3 years and, bilateral this and, he was a hometown kid and Mark Pryor and all this stuff. It's just you go, well, he was a catcher, right? And he won 3 batting titles? Okay, there's an easy check mark. So I'm encouraged. I'm pleasantly surprised, I should say, by that.
Yeah, if you want to find an archive somewhere, there's a game day program and scorecard story by me about where is Mauer currently amongst the best catchers of all time, and how high is he likely to go? Like that was a game day program and story that I wrote back in 2008, 2009. Right. I think at the time I had him as 7th best catcher all time, something like that. And he was climbing the charts at that time, so to speak. So.
Jay Jaffe, who's maybe one of the only people that's been blogging longer than the two of us. He used to have a blog called The Futility Infielder, I remember. Yeah. He, by the way, speaking of birthdays, don't ask me why I know this, born on Christmas Day. So one of the few worst, I remember because Ricky Henderson also, he used to do a team.
I think it's been 20 years since I'm sure I talked to Jay Jaffe back in the days when there were about 8 of us blogging, right?
I just saw him in Nashville, and I said, hey, I work with his wife. Her name is Emma Span. Who's an editor for The Athletic. And I said, hey, Jay. And he looked at me, and I could tell. He was like, I have no idea who this guy is. But then I said hi, and he was like, oh, my God. Anyway.
I want you guys all to wear name tags when I come to the
well, here's the thing. I look a little different than 20 years ago. About twice the weight, half the hair, But he has a great system called JAWS.
Oh, yeah.
That puts into context total career value, but more importantly, in my mind, sort of peak value. Yeah. And I don't just mean their best year, but like their best 7-year run sort of is how he uses it a lot of time. And if you view Mauer through that context, which is particularly important through catchers, because in people's mind, when Mauer moved off catcher, obviously it was premature, but the odds are, even if he'd not suffered the concussion, and honestly, even if he'd had 20% better overall health to that point, which would have been huge in his career, he was over 30. He might have had 2-3 more great years at catcher and then kind of transitioned to half catcher, half. The Johnny Bench, Ivan Rodriguez types are the extreme outlier. I mean, you look at Buster Posey, who for very different reasons had a similarly short length of career just because he called it quits, basically. Right. But for the most part, if you get 8 or 10 years as a great catcher, that's amazing. It's like 15 years at another position. And I think he has Mauer 8th all time. Okay. Among catchers, and that's with the short peak or the premature end to greatness and all that stuff. And so, in my mind, setting aside Mauer, catcher is extremely underrepresented in the Hall of Fame. I think partly because they don't accumulate the counting stats, 500 homers, 3,000 hits, because of the reason we just described. Right. First of all, in a season, they don't play 155, 160 games because no catcher can handle that workload. Right. But then even beyond that, on a career side, you might play 10 seasons instead of 14 seasons. So, that's that. I had one other thing. So, free agents signed, I looked at The Athletic ranked our top 40 at the beginning of the offseason.
Right, yeah.
5 of the top 10 have signed.
Okay.
10 of the top 20 have signed. So exactly 50%.
I'm surprised it's that few, actually.
18 out of our 40 have signed. Now, it's a little misleading because I looked at who our next 10 would have been because it was a 5-person. It was me, Eno Saris, Keith Law, Jim Bowden, and Tim Britton voted. So like number 41 signed, but I'm not. Right. It's roughly half of the top 50 free agents have signed. Right. So in that sense, you can sort of look at that as a gauge of
we're halfway through.
We're halfway through, regardless of what the calendar says. We're halfway through the offseason. And from a Twins standpoint,
and there's been a number of the big trades that people anticipated also have happened as well.
So. Although not all of them. Like from a pitching standpoint.
Yeah, from a pitching standpoint, there's still a couple names out there. Sure.
Okay, and then the last thing I had Monday. Everyone should go to The Athletic. And Twins Daily you can go to too, but go to The Athletic. I'll be putting out my 18th annual Minnesota Twins Top 40 Prospects list.
Oh, cool.
So tell Seth or whoever not to put out the Twins Daily list on Monday. Wait till at least Tuesday to put that out.
Seth, you hearing this?
Yeah, probably. He's going to put it out Sunday night.
I hope so.
Sunday night at 8 p.m. He'll put it out.
You're going to get that out by tomorrow.
Jump me in line.
That's right, yeah.
So, it's a very big article in terms of length. So I would appreciate it if everyone read it. And then maybe on the Patreon side, we can talk about my top 10 or something like that.
That is a good Patreon episode. I love that.
Yeah.
Good. We'll do that Tuesday.
Let's do a couple of ads, and then we'll get into Josh Staumont and some Twin stuff.
Yeah. Our sponsor, BetterHelp, becoming a longtime sponsor of the Gleeman and the Geek piece. We like BetterHelp because we believe in lowering the barriers to therapy. I think by far the biggest barrier to therapy is deciding you want to actually proceed with therapy.
It's the first step of the 1,000-mile walk.
Then comes the gut punch because you've finally gotten over that peak and you go, what now? What?
Now I got to wait a month. I got to call this.
Do I go on the white pages?
Yes. White pages.
Yellow pages.
That's not a thing anymore. Yes. With BetterHelp, here's how BetterHelp works. You can get set up with a real licensed therapist who can specifically address whatever your personal issue is. And this is the part that I think is good, especially usually within 2 weeks, which is a lot shorter,
right?
And often much quicker than that. And here's the beauty of it. If you want to do a video chat, you can do it. If you don't want to be on camera, you can call them. If you don't even want to call them, you don't like talking on the phone like me. I hate talking on the phone. Yeah. You can just do it live chat, type in chat. They'll set it up to whatever your comfort level is. And
it's also a little bit more affordable.
Yes. There's a special deal for Gleeman and the Geek listeners. Visit betterhelp.com/Gleeman today, and you can get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Gleeman.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in therapy, and they make it very easy. Also making it very easy is HelloFresh. What they do make it very easy for is for you to actually cook food, because listen, I will tell you how excited, the person who gets most excited in my house when I say, I'm getting some HelloFresh coming, is Chrissy. Because Chrissy is the person who, on a bi-weekly basis, sits and plans out all the meals and goes to the store and buys everything and brings it back. And what we do is that I will come home from work or say, okay, it's time to cook dinner. And she'll have like sort of the recipe out and the ingredients, and I get to go to town.
Yeah.
Well, HelloFresh takes care of all of that, right? And on top of that, it also shows you how to actually cook it, because there's a great 8x11 recipe, step-by-step piece with pictures,
which is valuable to me,
right, on how to cook this stuff. And on the back end, on the other side, you've got a big picture of here's how it's going to look at the end. You can take pictures of your stuff. It's very Instagrammable. It's absolutely something that you can
they send you
at the end.
All the ingredients, all portioned out, all fresh.
Right.
Whether it's meat, whether it's veggies, it comes. If it needs to be cold, it's shipped cold to you. Super easy, so you don't have to go shopping for it. You don't have to slice it all up.
Easy thing to do together. If you're like, we'll cook and Chrissy will sit. Chrissy and I will cook together, or I will cook and Chrissy will sit and drink a glass of wine and watch me cook.
Oh, how sexy that must be!
That is a nice date.
Yeah. Yeah, if it was a different guy, I should watch it. If you were Bobby Flay or something, I don't know. I couldn't think of it. If you were Gordon Ramsay. No? You do have a Gordon Ramsay vibe.
I do. I like to scream at people.
Yeah,
sure.
you do, yeah. You can go to HelloFresh.com/Gleeman free and use the promo code Gleeman free. And the reason it's Gleeman free is you will get free breakfast for life. One breakfast item per box while your subscription is active. That's free breakfast for life.
Those are good.
At HelloFresh.com/Gleeman free and then use the code Gleeman free. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit.
Yeah, breakfast sandwiches, muffins and stuff. We got some of those. Those are really yum.
Okay. So Josh Staumont.
Yeah, let's start with that.
Signed to a major league contract, and the reason that's notable is he goes on the 40-man roster.
Right.
And it differentiates him in that sense from a lot of minor league signings, which are non-guaranteed. They're called non-roster contracts. You'll hear NRI, which is non-roster invite. Those are the guys that come to spring training. They're in big league camp,
right,
trying to win a job on the 40-man roster, essentially. He's already on the 40-man roster. So that separates him from a lot of guys the Twins have and will sign every year, especially bullpen guys.
Yes.
A Twins official in Nashville at the winter meetings, when I was asking them pre-Josh Staumont signing about the state of the bullpen, one of them joked, well, you know us. We like to just get a big old pile of NRIs and hope two of them come out at the end and are useful.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what they did.
Right, yeah.
That's how Brock Stewart ended up Brock Stewart, basically.
Right. Yes.
Staumont is like,
a step ahead.
A step above that. From a monetary standpoint, his deal is worth, I didn't get an exact figure, but like $950,000, and there's some incentives, some smallish incentives. And again, that also differentiates him because a minor league deal, a non-roster invite type of deal, often can sometimes guarantee more than that. For instance, Willie Castro signed a non-roster minor league deal with the Twins that guaranteed him nothing. But he actually, once he made the major league roster, he made a prorated share of 1-point-something million or whatever. This is on the low side for that, but it's guaranteed.
Right.
So if he shows up to spring training, Josh Staumont, and he's hurt, which he's dealt with injuries, we're going to talk about that in a minute, or he's just no good, or they just decide, you know what, we don't want him anymore for whatever reason, they owe him $950,000. That differentiates him. But from a logistical, payroll standpoint, $950,000 is only $200,000 more than the major league minimum salary at this stage. And so if he's going to be on the roster, even if he were signed to a minimum deal, it's no impact on a team that has $25, $30 million payroll. $200,000 is meaningless in that context, obviously. And so the actual investment in him is very minimal.
Well, and on top of that, because it's, even though, it's a 1-year deal that he signed, he doesn't have 6 years of Major League Baseball tenure. So he's under team control for this year and next year, right? 2025
so
as well.
He's arbitration eligible, and actually the Royals cut him 6 weeks ago or whatever, before the arbitration deadline, when he had a projected $1.5 million or $1.2 million projection via arbitration, which is on the low side. And that tells you the Royals, because they could have just kept him at that total, which is cheap, and had him under control for 2025 as well via arbitration, when even in a good year he might have made $4 or $5 million, $5 million, let's say. So the fact that they cut him over, $1 million and change after he's been a pretty good player for them in 3 out of the past 5 years tells you that his recovery from thoracic outlet surgery, which we'll talk about in a second, and other various injuries over the last couple of years, that they're not very optimistic, the Royals aren't at all, that he's going to come back this season and be his old self. The Twins are essentially just making that identical bet, slightly lower price point, but basically the same bet that the Royals declined to make, which is always interesting. Yeah. Now, I'm not going to point to the Royals as some bastion of, health and pitching and all that stuff. So
they've got good bullpens. I mean, they've often had good bullpens.
They've often had a couple good relievers. They've generally had crappy bullpens.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
But yeah, you're right about that.
Right.
And he was part of that. Him and Barlow, especially, and then going back obviously to the runs they made to the World Series. They had great bullpens, but they usually find 2 or 3 good relievers. He was one of them. And from 2019 to 2021, Staumont was a legit, 8th inning, high strikeout setup man. Had a sub-3 ERA. Had 11 strikeouts per 9 innings, something like that. 95 to 98 mile an hour fastball, topped out at 100 occasionally, with a big breaking, beautiful, kind of traditional old school curveball that would just freeze guys because they're gearing up for 98, and then he just drops something at 82, 12 to 6 on the clock to him. That was the combo that, worked wonders. He had a 0.90 ERA against the Twins. That's not necessarily relevant because now he's not going to face Twins hitters. But they know plenty of Josh Staumont. I keep doing that. I view them as the same in my head. And by the way, Barlow now is on the Guardians.
I saw that, yeah.
So they know him well. He's had a lot of injury issues. He had some nagging issues, and then in the middle of last year, after struggling for about a year, he got shut down and had surgery to address thoracic outlet syndrome. Right. And, we're not doctors or anything, so take this for a grain of salt. But generally, you guys have probably heard about Tommy John surgery for elbows, and you've probably heard about labrum repairs for shoulders. Those are the two, most significant but still common injuries for major league pitchers. And they each carry about a year recovery, and I guess you'd rather have Tommy John than labrum, but you'd much rather even have labrum than thoracic outlet syndrome.
Yeah, maybe.
It's relatively new in that it's only been about 10 or so years since I can recall that popping up for pitchers. And, Phil Hughes had it, and Matt Harvey had it, and Steven Strasburg had it. Right. And there's some other prominent names. There's maybe a dozen or 24 prominent names. For the most part, the recovery rate from that is a coin flip. And a lot of guys are just never the same. Right. We saw that with Phil Hughes. They go in throwing 95 and they come out throwing 88.
It feels a little bit like, here's the surgery we're going to do if we don't know what else is happening. We can't figure out exactly what's going on. Right.
I don't want to say last resort because that implies like it's a panic situation. But a lot of times it's like the guy's having pain and his velocity is down and his effectiveness is down. Right. But we gave him an MRI, and there's no tear in his shoulder, and there's no tear in his elbow, but there's seemingly some nerve issues or something like that. And so
seems to have lost it, quote unquote. Yes. Yeah, right. And a lot of that is velocity. Mostly, I've seen it in the past. And it sounds like this is something that's definitely evolving, right? So that maybe it's changed.
Well, now there's three versions of thoracic outlet, and so I've had people say that. What we're kind of describing was the initial version.
One. Yes, I agree.
And so there's less
I don't know as much about this new one that he's been doing. Right?
But that's basically what happened to him, which is he struggled for like a year and a half, and his velocity was down, although even last year when he was not good, he was throwing average fastball 95, 96.
Yeah, his velocity isn't down a lot.
There's plenty of juice. Now we'll see what he comes back from this from. Right. But it's a risk, but it's not a risk from a monetary standpoint. And obviously the 40-man roster spot has value, but the Twins are not in a situation where they're really adding to the 40-man roster at this point, from a free agent standpoint. Right. So it's there's definite upside. It's very easy to see the upside. This is a guy who even at his worst threw 96 miles an hour with a decent curveball. Has never had great control, and that's another worry, after you have a surgery, how do you come back from that? But I think it's very straightforward to just envision him, whether it's on opening day or mid-season, who knows, because he does have a minor league option remaining. He can be just placed on the injured list, obviously.
He does not need to be on the team next year.
But if he's healthy, quote-unquote, but is struggling for whatever reason, they can just send him to AAA as if he's a normal minor league player.
Or if it takes him a little bit longer to recover or whatever, spring training doesn't go exactly the way you want it to be, you've got enough flexibility.
But it's pretty straightforward to envision him, being healthy, and he's still only 30, being the guy he was in 2021, 2 years ago, something like that, which is, 7th or 8th inning guy, a little bit wild, but throws hard, good breaking ball, and I won't be surprised if the Twins try to tweak his big curveball into more of a tighter slider or sweeper in that regard. And they've seen him a ton, and he's AL Central guy and all that. And so I don't think it's a huge leap of faith to just say, well, if he's mostly recovered from the thing that doctors have deemed the issue the last year or two, then maybe he won't be as good as he was when he was 26. But he could be as good as he was when he was 28, maybe, something like that. And so if that's the case, he maybe joins, Griffin Jacks and Brock Stewart, who, by the way, was a similar injury comeback bet by the Twins and has worked out pretty damn well. And Caleb Thielbar as the core setup group in front of Duran as the closer. Yeah. And I think the Twins probably they liked what they saw from the bullpen in September and October last year when the pieces started coming together. Paddock came back, Stewart came back, Louis Varland shifted the ball. They just had a lot of high octane, upper 90s miles per hour guys.
But a lot of that is not going to be available this year. What was available there is, you're going to have Varland moving back. I think back to the rotation. I think you're going to have Paddock moving back to the rotation.
Yes, Paddock will definitely be in the rotation. So Stewart will be there.
Yeah. You're banking on him staying healthy.
I think with Staumont and then with Ryan Jensen, who we can talk about in a minute, that they just claimed off waivers, he's a much lower. I actually won't be surprised if he gets put back on waivers. They try to pass guys through waivers. Those guys are big fastballs. I mean, they are upper 90s when healthy. They both have control issues, and they're not perfect pitchers. And Staumont's got the injury issues. Ryan Jensen has never been effective in the majors, so he's a bigger question mark, obviously. But AJ Alexi is a similar player. They just re-signed to a minor league deal.
Yes, right.
3 weeks ago or whatever. Right. Similar. They're looking for guys now. They're always looking for upside, low risk, high upside, or decent upside bullpen, as we just talked about. They like to get a whole bunch of guys, some of whom have never been in the majors but have good stuff. Right. Some of whom used to be good in the majors and have fallen on hard times. They like to throw them all in a big pile, a cheap pile that they haven't invested much in, and they hope 2 or 3 of them come out. And they've had an okay track record. Sure. Not great. That's clearly the goal. But I would say even within that pile now, they're looking for guys.
So sometimes those guys end up succeeding right after they drop them, though.
Well, that's true too,
the Orioles seem to be really good at waiting us out.
That's true. That's the danger of relievers.
Danny Colomb, and then what was the other guy? The guy they traded away for?
Cano.
Cano, right.
Traded. But that's the danger of relievers. These are guys who the sample sizes are small, the injuries are common,
Right.
But I would say even within that pile now, they're clearly kind of pushing towards the last year or so. We want guys who throw smoke. We want guys who can overpower hitters with high velocity fastballs. And this regime in general, from the moment they took over, pushed more towards that than the previous regime. Sure. But anybody would have pushed more towards that than the previous regime. The previous regime was allergic to velocity, basically. Yeah. But I think they're more, especially in the bullpen, they liked the idea of Louis Varland throwing 100 out of the bullpen. They like the idea of Brock Stewart as a setup man and all that. And there's still, the Caleb Thielbars of the world, although credit to Caleb Thielbar, he throws about 94 at this point. But so I think that's the play with these guys, with Staumont, with Jensen, with other guys. Let's see, one other thing.
I mean, the difference between Staumont and Jensen is Staumont's on a major league contract right now. Jensen's not. And so you've got, the upside to Jensen is significantly higher in that you got him around for 6 years if you still want him. He's never been on the majors, right?
Well, right. But the odds are Ryan Jensen will never have even one season as good as any season Josh Staumont had.
Right, correct. Yes.
I mean, Josh Staumont was a really good reliever for about 3 years, and that may not sound like much, but honestly, the average setup man, we've seen this in Twins history. Go back to Juan Rincon and J.C. Romero and all these guys. The average setup man, even really good setup men, 3-4 years they burn bright and they fade away. And so that's why he gets a guaranteed deal, and other guys are waiver claims and minor league deals. The thing with Jensen, and again, we wouldn't be talking about him if they had made 3 signings in a trade in the last month or whatever. He's just a waiver claim. That's all it is. And in fact,
he's a waiver claim of a guy who was a first-round pick for the Cubs, back, 3 years ago, something like that?
More than that. I think 2019, something like that. But they claimed him off waivers from a team that claimed him off waivers.
No, that's true. He's had an eventful offseason.
Yes. He's on his 4th team since mid-August.
Right, that's it. Yeah.
Former first-round pick as a starter, really never was a top prospect as a starter, in part because of control issues. Relatively recently shifted to the bullpen. The hope, obviously, we've seen this with a million guys in Twins history even, when you're a starter and you have durability issues or you have control issues or your raw stuff is good but not great, the idea is Griffin Jacks or, for that matter, Brock Stewart or Duran even, let alone Joe Nathan and Glenn Perkins and Eddie Guardado and everybody. You shift to the bullpen, and all of a sudden you add a few miles an hour to your fastball. You don't have to throw 180 innings in a season. You have to throw 60. You're throwing 15 pitches at a time instead of 100 pitches at a time and all that. That's the hope with him, is you can big-time fastball, upper 90s fastball. You hope with him, can he throw more strikes, airing it out for one inning at a time, as opposed to trying to get through the lineup 2 or 3 times.
I took a look at his draft profile back when he was drafted, and it was, here's a guy with a 98-mile-per-hour fastball, but he fell to the end of the first round because fringy control.
Right. He doesn't know where it's going.
And doesn't really have a third pitch. Well, guess where he is?
Yes.
He's on waivers because he's got and being picked up by several different teams because he's got big speed. He has control never really developed, and now he's been moved into a relief role because he doesn't have a third pitch.
What I will say is, so they claimed him off waivers from the Marlins, I want to say?
Yes.
They claimed him from the Mariners, who had claimed him from the Cubs.
Right.
Now, the Marlins aspect is important because it's my understanding that, and we won't know this for sure.
And in all these cases, he was sort of one of the last guys on the 40-man roster, and they made some offseason move that they needed to clear some room, and so
which is the case now with the Twins. My understanding is that the last time he was waived by the Mariners, like a month ago or month and a half ago, the Twins put in a claim for him then, but the Marlins, by virtue of having a worse record, Got him.
Okay.
And so then the Marlins did what many teams do, and the Twins may in fact try to do with him still, which is you claim a guy off waivers, you put him on the 40-man roster, and then a day later or a week later or a month later, you either need to take him off the 40-man roster because you need his spot for a signing or something, or you just say to yourself, we like this guy. We'd like him a lot more if you weren't taking up a spot on the 40-man roster. So let's pick a time, whether it's a day later or what, where we place him on waivers, and we'll cross our fingers and hope that the other 29 teams don't notice that he's on waivers or just aren't at a good time for them in terms of placing someone on the 40-man roster. They have a roster crunch, let's say, of their own, and they let him pass through waivers because then if you put a guy like Jensen on waivers and he passes through waivers, you get to keep him in the minors without the 40-man roster spot, which is ideal. I suspect, I don't know this to be true, let's put it this way. Don't be surprised if the Twins attempt to do that over the next several weeks. Wow. Regardless of what other moves they make, they could take him off the 40-man roster, place him on waivers, hope that this time he passes through waivers unclaimed, given that he's been on waivers 4 times already, although he's been claimed each time. And the goal would be, if we can pass him through waivers, then he's just AAA depth. That's great. He's in the organization. He doesn't take up a 40-man roster spot. Now, they don't have to. It depends. They don't want to risk it or whatever. But that's sort of where he's at.
If they end up, we'll talk a little bit about the center field market here in a second, but if they end up signing a center fielder or trading for a center fielder for a prospect, on the other hand, if they let Polanco off of the 40-man roster, maybe they don't need that spot. We'll see what happens.
They got, what are they at, 38 right now? 40? 37 or 38?
30. I was going to say 39 at this point.
I think it's 38.
Okay.
But yeah. Let's see. So yeah, that's Josh Staumont. Potentially a setup caliber guy. And, big time stuff, but huge question mark.
Sure.
And they don't know the answer to this because he's still in the recovery process. Now, the hope definitely is that he would be ready for opening day, but it's such an uncertain road back from thoracic outlet surgery or syndrome surgery.
It will be one of the things that we monitor from spring training. So,
okay.
And you going to spring training this year, by the way?
Of course.
Have you got your dates figured out?
Oh, no. But I'll go. Okay. I'll be there early.
Yeah, we're setting ours up.
I always go early. We can do some shows from there.
Yes, for sure we will.
Yeah, I'll see you there, buddy.
Yeah.
Let's pretend we don't know each other.
That's a good idea.
What's your name?
Right.
Bonus. How do you spell that?
Yeah.
Do you know Phil?
It makes for an odd podcast, though.
True. Yeah. True.
Why are we here with these 2 mics? Yeah. Why am I interviewing a stranger?
We should pretend we don't know each other and see if we would become friends. Do you know what I mean? We hang out. Listen, John. We hang out with a lot of the same people.
That's true.
So maybe we'll become friends.
Right.
So yeah, claim Ryan Jensen. Other minor signing move, low wattage, was they signed old friend Nico Goodrum to a minor league contract. That. People may not remember Nico Goodrum, but he was drafted way back in 2010.
Right.
And he was like a second or third round pick, I think Georgia High School, I want to say, Southern High School. And he made it to the majors with the Twins.
He was always somewhere in like the lower 10s, early teens of a prospect on the Twins.
Yeah.
Right.
Was a shortstop, played some center, good athlete, switch hitter, all that stuff. Never had a great breakout in the minors and all that. And then he just kind of never got a chance, and he became one of these like organizational soldier type of guys, which is you're good. They want to keep you. They're not trying to cut you. Right. And they like having you at like AA or AAA, but you're like 25, 26, 27. They're like, we like this guy. We'd like to have him at AAA. And he actually got called up at the end of, I want to say, it was one of the Gardenhire seasons, I think.
I thought it was the end of I thought it was a Molitor season, but I thought it was the end of the Ryan era, so it might have been 2016.
Okay, that's probably about right.
Sound right.
And he got like a few at-bats, a few games, and it was, at the time, I remember them making it clear that it was sort of like a reward for being a well-liked, long-time organizational soldier. Right, yeah. And then he left, he was dropped from the 40-man roster, and he went to the Tigers, who coincidentally had Ron Gardenhire as their manager at that point. Yeah. Or shortly after that. And he had a nice couple of years in Detroit. He got pretty regular playing time. Yep. He won his way onto that roster as like a utility man. Yep. He was their starting shortstop for a while. He was their starting third baseman. I mean, he played, 300-400 at bats. I think maybe even a season with more than that. Showed a little bit of pop. I remember people complaining, how could the Twins have let this guy go?
Sure, right.
And then he had like 2 years where he was pretty bad for them. Yeah. And he got to arbitration with them, I think. And then they cut him loose. And then he played 1 year with the Astros as a utility guy and was pretty bad. And then I think he spent last year, I want to say, in Korea.
I think that's right.
Playing.
I know it was abroad. I don't know if it was Japan or Korea.
Good. Right. Abroad, yeah. I was going to make a joke, but it would be sexist. So I'm not going to make it. Abroad. Anyway. Okay. Now he's back. I think he's 30-something. Has to be. 2010. He's 31 maybe.
Must be.
And he signed a minor league deal with the Twins. And here is what I would say about that. He is being looked at purely as organizational depth at this point.
Sure.
Now, that doesn't mean he couldn't win his way onto the job, onto the roster. It doesn't mean if injuries hit the infield, he wouldn't be an option midseason. Right. It just means he's no longer viewed as part of the plan for 2024. He would be a guy you put at St. Paul.
He's not going to be on anybody's projected roster for the 2024 Twins.
But, we've seen stranger things happen.
He will be in St. Paul.
Yes, probably, if he wants to be. He might have an opt-out. Who knows? I think he would probably be a utility role in St. Paul, because St. Paul, they're going to have Austin Martin. They're going to have Brooks Lee. They're going to have some other prospects on that front that you're going to want to play. So
they may have Austin Martin.
Right. Yeah. That's Nico Goodrum. Welcome back, friend.
Yeah.
Nico Goodrum.
Yes.
We'll probably see him in spring training.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever talked to him. Okay. I think that's all I have on those notes. The one other thing we wanted to talk about is the center field situation, which we talked about a lot last week. So we won't get into like the Buxton aspect of it on the last show.
2 weeks ago, yeah.
But the thing that's changed now is
a lot of people have signed.
I felt like
people have signed.
2 weeks ago, I felt like given the Twins' payroll situation and given the, I guess, renewed optimism that they seem to have during the winter meetings about Buxton, rightly or wrongly, whatever, that I just felt like the likelihood of them spending any sort of substantial money on a free agent center fielder were much lower than we maybe thought coming into the offseason. And that means Kevin Kiermaier, Michael A. Taylor as a re-sign possibility, Harrison Bader. Those were really the three guys we kind of focused on. And coming into the offseason, we were like, well, they don't have much money, but, 8 to 12 million on one of those guys on a 1 year deal could work. We were like, well, maybe they want a 2 year deal, in which case that's unlikely. I think it just became unlikely because they didn't feel like 10 million was doable at this stage. Yep. And even if they felt it was doable, that's not the place they would prioritize investing what limited money they have in their self-imposed budget. You toss in the Buxton factor where they're somewhat optimistic relative to where they were, at previous points, that he will be a center field option. And I think logically that makes sense. Now, 2 of those 3 guys have signed since we did our last free show. Kevin Kiermaier re-signed with the Blue Jays. He would have been my top target.
Sure.
He got $10.5 million from the Blue Jays
on a 1 year deal. Though
on a 1 year deal, he's 33, I think, but he's an all-time great defensive player. Had a pretty good year offensively, left-handed hitter, bottom of the lineup type of guy. But he would have been the guy I would have targeted first. And I will say that under normal circumstances, for a team that has a need in center field, or maybe has a need in center field, if they would have a normal payroll situation this offseason, I would absolutely have liked to have spent $10.5 million or let's say $11 million on Kevin Kiermaier.
Yep.
But I don't think they made him an offer even or anything. So he re-signed with Toronto, and then yesterday or the day before, yesterday I think, Harrison Bader signed with the New York Mets for the identical contract, $10.5 million. Yeah. I'm surprised. I certainly would have been more willing to give Harrison or give Kevin Kiermaier more money than Harrison Bader.
Right.
But $10 million's on the higher side, but I think in general we were like $8 million for Harrison Bader, 8 to 12 on all these guys.
Right, yeah.
So it's a little on the high side. On the other hand,
I would have thought Kiermaier would go for more. Specifically, I thought he was going to get 2 years, so I thought he was going to get 22. And then I would have thought Bader, comes in at 1 and 8. So it does surprise me they ended up at the same.
The Mets are owned by the richest owner in sports.
Right. Yeah.
What's he care? About $2 million. He's right-handed. Maybe that fits their outfield situation a little bit, but I'm pretty sure it does. But that, under normal circumstances, is a little more than I probably would have given Harrison Bader.
Right.
It now leaves Michael A. Taylor as the last non-Cody Bellinger center fielder on the free agent market.
I forgot about that.
And the reason we differentiate those guys from Cody Bellinger is Cody Bellinger is going to cost, I don't know, minimally $100 million, certainly.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe $150, $200 million. And so, these guys are 8, 10, 12 million. Michael A. Taylor is probably feeling pretty good about his situation right now, that he's the last man standing. $10 million has kind of been established now as the market for that type of center fielder. There's certainly more teams other than just the Blue Jays and the Mets that are in need of a stopgap 1 year center fielder, certainly.
Right. Including the Twins.
I will be. They like Michael A. Taylor on and off the field. He did a good job for them, essentially replacing Buxton as the starting center fielder. He was well liked, I will say. He's just a good veteran, calming guy. Again, under normal circumstances, with a normal payroll, year over year, 5-10% rising payroll, 1 year, $10 million for Michael A. Taylor would be a deal that I certainly would be fine with, and they probably would be fine with. I just don't think they view center field right now as an area to invest in at all. And that they may be proven silly in that regard or wrong in that regard, but I wouldn't expect Taylor. Now, if he's still available in a month for a 1 year, $5 million deal, maybe.
Yeah, I think we talked about this 2 weeks ago, but my number one thing is I think they are more likely to go and trade for a fringy center fielder, a good defensive center fielder who isn't particularly strong hitter.
I don't even think they're going to do that.
Yeah,
I think it's going to be Buxton, and if it's not Buxton, it's going to be Willie Castro, and if it's not Willie Castro, it's going to be Nick Gordon, and if it's not any of those guys, it might just be Austin Martin, and some progression of that midseason.
Yes, right.
The other thing is, obviously, if Buxton is injured and he's just not, or he's only able to DH,
right,
he's not worth $15 million a year.
Sure.
Clearly, he has 5 years left at $15 million a year on his contract. However, we just got done talking about Harrison Bader, who is purely a defensive value guy the past several years.
That's fair.
He 3 or 4 years ago showed some offensive upside, but nowhere near Byron Buxton's offense. His offense in a good year is close to Byron Buxton's offense in a bad year.
Right. Provided Buxton can still run around center field.
Exactly.
Right?
Well, that's the thing. But we just talked about how coming off back-to-back horrible years by Harrison Bader offensively, still a really good defender, but he's also 30 and, he's getting $10.5 million.
Yeah.
Byron Buxton at $15 million, is that more than the Twins would like to have committed for the next 5 years? Absolutely.
Sure.
Is that contract upside down in the sense that if they tried to trade him, first of all, he'd have to wait if there's no trade, but they'd have to eat some money to unload that contract? Sure. Absolutely. But I have zero doubt that if Byron Buxton were a free agent right now, which, by the way, he would be if they hadn't signed him to that extension, if he were willing to sign a 1 year deal, he'd get more than Harrison Bader, right?
Probably. Yeah.
So
right.
What's the gap between paying him $15 million and paying Harrison Bader $10.5 million?
Yes.
The gap is really what the future is.
Right.
But for a 1 year thing, let's put it this way: you remove Byron Buxton from this roster, and his contract from this roster, well, then they really would have a need in center field. They would have to find someone to play center field. We'd be sitting here going, Byron Buxton on a 1-year, $15 million deal might not be the end of the world.
Yeah, that's fair.
So that's kind of how I'm viewing that in the context of that. So that's the center field situation. I would expect Buxton.
Maybe you catch fire,
Yeah, right. It's the same thing. It's he's young, still 30, it's same age as Bader, younger than Kiermaier, younger than Michael A. Taylor. So I think Buxton is atop that depth chart, which was not the case this time last year. They were planning on this DH only thing that didn't really work. A couple other things before we finish up here on the free agent side since we last spoke. Some Twins adjacent or former Twins who have signed that of interest. Feel free to just comment on these.
Okay.
Mitch Garver got a 2-year, $24 million deal from Seattle. They have Cal Raleigh as an all-star catcher.
Right.
So
he's going to be mostly DHing?
Yes, which I think is good probably for him at this stage. I mean, Mitch Garver was never a great defensive catcher.
Is he going to be a backup catcher?
I think, maybe, but I think he's going to be their
third
DH.
catcher?
Yeah, I think he's going to be their DH, basically. He hasn't caught regularly and stayed healthy basically ever. I mean, it's been years. He's 33, I want to say. I think that's the best role for him. I mean, I don't want to. I'm sure the Mariners, and if I signed Garver, I would feel the same way. You don't want to say to him, throw out your catching gear,
right?
And it'd be nice if he could catch once a week or something like that, to just from a flexibility standpoint or a emergency standpoint. But he just had such trouble staying healthy, and yet has been so productive as a right-handed power bat when healthy that. What percentage of his potential value is gained or lost by catching? I just want his bat in the lineup.
Well, at some point you've got. I mean, it depends on how much. I mean, it's just kind of similar to what the Twins were trying with Buxton last year.
True,
right? I mean,
yes, but I think Garver was never. That position is hard to fill, but Garver was never a great defender. He was okay as a defender, and also at 33, the odds of remaining a good. Durable catcher at 33. We just talked about this with Mauer is low, regardless of injuries. And I don't think Mitch Garver's ever had 400 at bats in a season ever in his life, and of late. But he was good for the Rangers last year in a part-time role, DH heavy role. He's always crushed left-handed pitching. We saw that with the Twins. He'll give you a good at bat. He has a lot of right-handed power. I think that's a decent signing for Seattle for that role, and also for Mitch Garver to get a multi-year deal at $12 million a year at age 33 in his first trip to free agency, what might be his only trip to free agency. That's 3 times the salary he's ever made in a season before. So I think that's a decent payday for him to get a multi-year deal in a market where we just talked about Kiermaier. A lot of guys who are 30 plus, mid-level free agents are not even getting a second year.
Right.
They're getting 1 year. So I don't know.
I'm taking a look at the catching breakdown for the Mariners last year. Raleigh had 114, Murphy had 41, O'Keefe 4, and Torrance 1. So, you can see them.
114's on the high side.
Yeah, for sure.
That's one of the.
Especially, I just take a look at the breakdown here. In September, there were 3 games that he did not start.
Right.
All of September.
They needed to win in September.
That's right.
And he's a really good catcher.
Right. So I can see them doing something like, he's get 114, and then maybe they go as high as 20 of Garver, something like that. And I don't know if they.
I also wouldn't be surprised if Garver is a DH first base instead of a DH catcher.
Well, that's true too
at this stage. Yep. But yeah, I think that's a decent fit. Isaiah Kiner Falefa, who technically is an old friend, even though it was about 3 days. Not even 3 days. Yep. But they did produce a jersey that he wore for a picture. I'll never forget. There's a picture of him arriving at spring training. Or maybe not even spring training. Was it during spring training? He must have just come.
It might. No, it was spring training because it was the lockout year.
Right.
So they went immediately into spring training.
There's a picture of him in a jersey shaking Rocco Baldelli's hand that they posted on Twitter, and then 30 hours later, he was been traded to the Yankees in the Josh Donaldson.
That would be an underrated jersey to find at Target Field these days.
Yeah, Isaiah
that would be a fantastic one.
He's related to Mitch Garver in that's how they got him originally. Okay. He was on the Rangers, shortstop utility, actually former catcher himself, and they traded Mitch Garver to the Rangers for Kiner Falefa and Ronnie Henriquez, who was a prospect at the time, who's kind of flamed out a little bit. They were going to use him as their starting shortstop, and then they traded him to dump Josh Donaldson's salary on the Yankees to get Gio Urshela and Gary Sanchez in return, and then sign Carlos Correa to be the shortstop. So he got, and this is one of...
Is Ronnie Enriquez still in the 40-man?
No, dropped from the 40-man, but still in the organization.
Okay, yeah, so he's another one of those guys that would be in spring training probably.
This, to me, the Kiner Falefa contract, 2 years, $17 million from the Blue Jays, and it sounds like they might just start him at third base because they lost, or they're potentially losing Matt Chapman, who's like an all-star third baseman, to free agency, and it doesn't sound like they're going to re-sign him. Kiner Falefa is like a solid utility guy, runs well, can play everywhere defensively, but here's his OPS plus the last 3 years. 78, which means he's 20%, 22% worse than the league average. 78, 84, 85. I mean, that's not starting caliber unless you're a Gold Glove shortstop, basically.
Right.
To get 2 years, now $17 million is not some massive payday or something, but 2 years guaranteed at that, and then to want to give him a starting job is it's interesting for a team that's been pretty offense driven. I would say the Blue Jays. So that's one of the more. I would not have pegged him, given the rest of the market, as getting a 2-year deal. Right. I guess is what I'm saying.
I wonder a little bit if that's a reflection on what the Twins. What that says to me is Kyle Farmer might be of interest actually out there.
Too, yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, a 1 year, $6+ million deal for Kyle Farmer doesn't look like such a bad deal.
Right.
For some, I mean, he could. I would think I wouldn't take him fielding wise over Falefa, but I might take him as an overall.
Yes. He's definitely a better hitter.
Especially if you're looking for somebody to hit versus left-handed pitching, I would definitely.
Oh, he's definitely a better hitter. Now, he's not a better fielder, but depends what your need is. But yeah, I'd rather have Farmer. I'm trying to think. Would I rather have if they were both 1 year, $6.5 million? Yeah, I'd probably rather have Farmer. It's close though, but I'd rather have Farmer
on 1 year than
that's
on 2.
Undeniable.
Right.
A couple other of note signings. Frankie Montas, who's not a former Twin, but has had many memes made about him by Twins fans on Twitter, to the point that I asked Derek Falvey if he had seen the "Where Frankie" meme, which was him and Levine. I don't even know what it's from. It's from some show or cartoon or something, where it was, photoshopped Levine and Falvey heads on whatever this was, saying "Where Frankie" because fans at the deadline 2 years ago, I guess, the trade deadline. Or even in spring training.
I think it was spring training.
It was clear that the Twins were looking to trade for a starting pitcher. They ended up trading for Tyler Mahle at that deadline. Yes. But Frankie Montas, who had been with Oakland, was a prominent name being mentioned as a trade candidate that spring and then leading up to the deadline 2 years ago. And the Twins were interested. I can confirm that. I mean, they definitely had talks with Oakland that spring for sure about Montas. They ended up Oakland traded him to the Yankees. And for however bad the Tyler Mahle era in Minnesota went, which is he made like 6 starts, was never healthy, tore his elbow and became a free agent. He was both more effective and more durable for the Twins than Frankie Montas was for the Yankees. Yes. I'm not exaggerating. Frankie Montas now is healthy in the sense that he threw 1 inning for the Yankees, I think, in the final day of the season last year, or the final weekend, I think. And so now he signed with the Reds, 1 year, $16 million. And that is a clear, upside play, and that's a common thing. Wow. Luis Severino signed, I think, for $12 million with the Mets, a similar deal. These formerly really good starting pitchers who are coming back from injury.
That is the type of contract we projected for him.
A lot more money.
It's just a little more money than we thought. I think we were closer to like 12.
I think this speaks to just inflation. It's like when I complain that the prices at McDonald's are so much higher than it was when I was a kid. It's a common thing I complain about. Double cheeseburger, it used to be 79 cents.
Yeah, that's true.
Becky's like, well, yeah, but you used to be watching a VHS while you bought them. Like, what are you talking about? But anyway, now they're $9. But anyway, I also just wonder, to the extent that like teams like the Twins, there are more and more teams who are every offseason target the comeback, bounce back, high upside injury starter.
Okay, yeah.
And they're trying to get him on 1-year deals. It's become sort of every offseason we're like, well, here's 4 of those guys. Well, if enough teams are starting to kind of target and prioritize those guys, they go from being like a medium risk, high upside to almost in a way like overpriced.
Right. Yeah.
Because the thing is, like, obviously, if a healthy Frankie Montas would get $100 million or something.
Well, healthy and effective. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
But even if he were just sort of let's say he had made 8 starts down the stretch last year and been pretty decent. In my mind, well, what is that worth? Maybe $20 million a year as a starting pitcher. I mean, we saw that with like Sonny Gray got $25 million. Well, they're paying $16 million a year. He's thrown 1 inning in the last 2 years. Like it's you're paying much closer now to like the going rate than the like sort of we're taking a risk. We should get it at half price. Now, it doesn't mean it's a bad move. The one thing I will say about this one is, on these 1-year deals.
It was a thin pitching market, too.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I mean, though there's still a few names out there.
But yeah, I just mean like if everyone's targeting the same, like low risk, high reward, the prices get
of course.
But here's what I'll say about Montas, and similar to some other players in this situation is, if he's really good and healthy for them, first of all, you'll love to pay him $16 million. It's a mutual option, but those never get picked up because if he's really good, he'll decline it, and if he's injured, they'll decline it. But let's say he's really good, and you say, "Oh, they should have signed him to a multi-year deal or something like that." Except that means they got an all-star caliber year for $16 million, which any team would be happy to do. And if he's really good, they can make him the qualifying offer. He'll reject it, and then they get a first-round pick that they've basically created from scratch.
Yeah, that's true. That be one of the reasons why we're seeing much of premium prices on these guys.
So I think that's
a really good point.
That's part of the equation. Thank you, John.
Yeah,
it's first of the new year. Might not be a second.
You're right.
It's good to put one check on the board right away, and then it's like November, and I'm like, I'm waiting for that second. That was a good point for me. The last one on this front, Lucas Giolito.
Yeah.
Who has started more games against the Minnesota Twins in the target field era than any pitcher except Justin Verlander and Rick Porcello, which is a good stat. I only remember that because I tweeted that out in a stat. And also was relevant to the Twins last year because he got claimed off waivers by the Guardians and started the game that I will forever point to as the moment at which the Twins won the division or put them away from the division.
Yes, I agree.
Which is he gave up, I believe, approximately 1,000 runs.
In 2/3 of
Yes, I think it was 10. I want to say 9 or 10
it
runs.
Was a lot of runs.
It was a lot of runs. And that was also the game where...
I think it was his first start for the Guardians.
It was. Yeah. And he only made I don't know how many starts for the Guardians, but it wasn't that many. That was also the game where Miles Straw, their center fielder, overran the ball in center field.
Oh, right.
And that became a meme in itself. A lot of memes mentioned on the show. This is me being 41 and trying to feel like I'm young by mentioning memes.
Right.
Is that still a thing? I don't know. Memes. There was a lot of speculation. We talked a lot about what type of deal should he be going for as a healthy but formerly very good all-star caliber pitcher who struggled 2 years ago, was pretty good in the first half last year, went through that horrible situation where he gets waived again, picked up. He's on 3 teams in a month and all that, but he was so bad in the second half, including for Cleveland, obviously, like we just talked about, that his ERA jumped from, I don't know, I think he had like an 8 ERA in the second half or something.
It was terrible.
And so, but he's still relatively young, and from a stuff
perspective. He was especially terrible with Cleveland.
Yes, which was very helpful to this one. But... So, we debated at the beginning of the offseason, if you're Lucas Giolito and his agent, do you want to pursue just a straight-up 1-year deal and really bet on yourself bouncing back and then getting a $100 million deal if you prove yourself that you're an all-star again? Or if you don't have that much faith in yourself, do you want a 3-year deal where you can kind of get comfortable somewhere, get some success, guarantee yourself 40 or 50 million, and then still have the chance to get one more crack at free agency? So he sort of split the difference there. He signed a 2-year deal. It's an interesting structure to the deal. I think I have this right. But 2 years, $38.5 million with the Red Sox, which is almost $20 million a year. I mean, that's not, again, that's an upside play, but you're almost paying kind of market value. Like a fully healthy and effective Lucas Giolito would have signed for more years.
Sure.
But I don't know that he would have gotten more than $20, $22, $24 million a year or something like that. But this deal with the Red Sox is 2 years, $38.5 million with an opt-out, a player opt-out after the first year. And so if he has a great year, he can say, see ya.
Oh, okay.
I'll go get the free
that player opt-out makes it a big difference, right?
More and more contracts are including player opt-outs and that sort of thing, which is interesting because I think we don't do a good job because it's a relative.
I don't hate that from a team standpoint either. I can see why that does become popular because from a player's standpoint, it's like, this is a make-good deal, but I also kind of got my second year guaranteed if I suck.
Right. It lowers the upside for the team because if he has a great year, he'll just opt out.
Right.
On the other hand, like with Frankie Montas, if he has a great year, you'll have been happy to have paid him $18 million for a great year.
Where it sucks is if he has a crap year.
Or he's hurt, then you're stuck with a second year. Although even if he just has sort of a meh year and doesn't opt out and you're paying him, I don't know, $19 million for 2025, well, he's just proven that that's sort of his market rate anyway. But I don't know, that's an interesting signing. I like him as a bounce back candidate. Again, I think in a normal circumstance, he might be a guy the Twins would have targeted. I don't know if they would have paid that sort of price because I think that's on the higher side of what I was expecting. But it's an interesting signing for Boston.
In terms of the high-end pitching market, then, do we still have Snell out there? And Stroman and Montgomery, right? That's it, right? Those three pretty big. I mean, those guys are all going to get multi-year, 3+ year deals.
Yeah, although I've heard Stroman's market is not good at all.
Really?
I don't know what that means, but for whatever that's worth. Because he opted out of not a huge remaining contract with the Cubs, but a decent pay with the Cubs. But yeah, I'm sure my expectation is Snell and Montgomery are going to sign for well over $100 million.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay, so those are those signings. I don't know. I wish I could tell you. You know, I was confident that a move was coming. We've had some off seasons past where you and I get cute and we say, "Be ready for a move." Right. There's one coming. I think we're at the stage of the offseason, just from a timing perspective, that the moves can come anytime. There are no more dominoes that need to fall from a free agency standpoint that open up, a Polanco trade, a Kepler trade, a Farmer trade.
Teoscar Hernandez sign?
No.
Okay.
I mean, there's still some good players, but I just mean
I get you.
The chess pieces have started to move enough, and it's late enough in the process. We're in 2024, after all, that we're starting to talk about spring training booking, that you can go ahead and just make your moves. I'm just not confident what those moves or when those moves will be. I don't think they're going to sign anybody of any significance from just a free agent standpoint.
No, I don't think so either. I think Taylor's maybe still in play. We'll see.
That'd be nice, but
I would say it's less than a 50% chance, right?
So yeah, that's we'll obviously.
You still think there's better than 50% chance that Polanco and or Kepler, like, you think there's still a 100% chance that either Polanco or Kepler are not on this team by the time spring training rolls around?
If you include Farmer,
I'll
say there's a 100% chance.
How about if I just say Polanco, Kepler?
It's a little iffier. I think there are scenarios where you could trade one of Farmer or Polanco, and the guy who isn't traded kind of platoons. Like Farmer could platoon with Julian. Polanco, I don't know what you'd have to play Julian at DH first base a little bit more, but there's room. There's just not like there from a infield mix standpoint, there isn't room for everybody. But even just from a 26-man roster standpoint, if you're keeping Willie Castro and Nick Gordon and a backup catcher.
I'm not sure you are, but keep going.
Yeah. Castro's definitely going to be on the team. They've got Nick Gordon for $1 million. They could trade him, obviously. But at some point, you just don't. They're not going to have a 5-man bench. You're only going to have a 4-man bench. So something's got to give. And also just if they're not, they are going to make changes. Josh Staumont is not going to be the big addition of the offseason. And if it's not going to be in free agency, or I'll say this, like, if it's not going to be free agency, it's got to be trade. And if it's in trade, you're either trading away prospects or those names we just mentioned. And even if you are, let's say they do end up signing someone of some significance in free agency, to do that, unless the payroll situation has changed, would first require, or sort of in tandem require, trading the salaries of Polanco, Kepler, Farmer, Vasquez,
right,
one of those guys.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I wasn't sure that Farmer would be offered arbitration in the first place. So, yeah, I still feel like there's a 75% chance that Farmer isn't on this team on opening day.
I agree
right?
with that.
I think what's keeping him on this team is they are still trying to see what they can. Right,
because
they can move Polanco.
If you trade Polanco,
like Polanco suddenly makes Polanco makes a lot of sense for the Brewers, and the Brewers have Corbin Burns, and it's like, well,
no. If you trade Polanco,
right?
Now you could certainly trade Polanco and Farmer, and you're still in decent shape.
Still right.
But if you trade Polanco, then suddenly Farmer is more of a true backup.
Right.
He can platoon with Julian. There's more of an opportunity to get like 300 at bats for him.
I mean, we did talk about not a lot has happened over the last 2 weeks, but. We are at the point, like you said, where about 50% of all the free agents have sort of signed. A lot of a number of the trades have been made. There's still a bunch of trades kind of sitting out there. We are within 6 weeks now of spring training, right? Probably pitcher catcher report. I think Valentine's Day.
That's romantic.
In some ways, the room to maneuver or the room to wait is sort of shrinking, right? But,
well, and also
in terms of time frame and in terms of available players and in terms of available trades. It's
agreed. Plus, the arbitration process will start.
Well, that's true too.
Late this month. I think it's 20-something. Where the guys you offer these contracts to, you got to start paying them. You'll determine what the price is at least, and that's going to spur some trades. Obviously,
we haven't gone through the point where each team is submitting a number yet, have we?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I haven't heard about it. Yeah, it's got to be right around the corner.
It's within weeks,
right?
So that will spur some trades. It doesn't necessarily change anything, but you would like to avoid going through an arbitration hearing with Kyle Farmer if your plan with Kyle Farmer is just to trade him anyway. Right. You would like his new team to handle that, to determine the price and determine all that. Also, these hearings can get kind of hairy. You'd like to avoid it just in general because it's not it's not quite a roast of the player, but the goal of the team is to suppress the salary. Right. And so to do that, they will downplay the value of that player.
Right.
And we've heard from players, both with the Twins or just in general, who come out of the hearing thinking, boy, they hate me. They said I stink and my defense was bad and I didn't drive in runs. And man,
it's a bucket of cold water.
Yeah, you'd like to avoid it in general. You'd especially just like to avoid it. Like, why do we want to say Kyle Farmer's bad and then just trade Kyle Farmer? The last thing, I looked this up because I'm feeling old. Do you know how many, if any, Major League Baseball players who were active last season are older than you at this stage?
Who are more than 41 years old at this point.
41 in 2 days now is how old I am.
I will say 2.
Okay, so going into last season, the start of last season, there were 3.
Okay.
Nelson Cruz, who is done. Adam Wainwright, who is done.
Yeah. And Justin Verlander?
Justin Verlander was born 35 days after me. He was next on the list. I looked it up.
Okay.
This is how old I'm feeling. I actually looked it up. But yes, Justin Verlander was born in February. I was born in January of 1983. Rich Hill.
Oh, of course.
Who is 2 full years and some older than me.
Yeah, right. He signed with somebody?
No, but he pitched last year for the Pirates and one of the team, I think. Rich Hill.
We are rooting for Rich Hill.
Yes, I need Rich Hill to keep going. But
listen, we've always been rooting for Rich Hill.
But Rich Hill, what was that, 4 years ago? 3 years ago? When he was with the Twins.
Right.
He was old as hell. I can say this. I was in my 30s then. Exactly. I was a young man. Right. He was 40 then.
Right.
I'll always remember Rich Hill. Super nice guy who turns into a maniac on the mound.
Right.
The most dad vibes you've ever seen. I will remember in Fort Myers, he signed the same year that they signed Marwin Gonzalez and traded for Kenta. So was that 2020? Yeah, 2020. Okay. My memory of him in the club. So that was my first season covering the team full time too. My memory of him in the Fort Myers clubhouse is him sitting cross-legged in a office chair by his locker. Reading the newspaper
in like a dad robe,
sipping coffee with his son next to him, sitting on the floor opening packs of baseball cards. So it was very clear. That's like my first memory of Rich Hill. I walked in.
Christmas morning.
He had like his slippers on. Yeah, that's exactly right. He had his slippers on. He might have been doing a literal crossword in the newspaper. He had the newspaper fully splayed out on him. He was sipping like a Starbucks or whatever. And his kid clearly had been given these packs of baseball cards just to have him relax. Like, you're with me today because the Twins allow kids to be around. I think it's part of what they're going for, the vibe of it all. And I remember that. And yeah, Rich Hill was always extremely good to talk to. He has a million stories. He knows everybody. He was very forthcoming and interesting. And then you'd see him on the mound and he was just yelling expletives at himself, at others, screaming, throwing the rosin bag down. And then you'd talk to him after, and he'd be like, "Hi, guys. What questions do you have for me? I'm going to go read the newspaper."
146 innings last year he threw.
Yeah, and he wasn't
that bad.
Good, but he was effective.
Right.
Throwing.
He got traded at the deadline, didn't he?
I think so, yeah. He was with Pittsburgh, I know. And he throws, Twins fans probably remember 3-4 years ago when he was with the Twins, he was throwing 86 with his fastball. He was all about the curveball, obviously. Last year, I believe his fastball was like 84 miles. You have to think, but he's already well past this point. Yeah. And by the way, go look up Rich Hill's baseball reference page, which I think you're looking at.
I'm looking at his RotoWire, actually. He will turn 44 shortly after opening day next year.
I need him to keep going. Look at his career. A lot of the guys, Nelson Cruz is an example, Justin Verlander, Adam Wainwright. If you're still playing at 40, let alone 43, the odds are that in your 20s, you were Cy Young, MVP, all-star caliber guy.
Right.
Because those are the guys who are still great. Jim Thome is an example of this, obviously. Mariano Rivera, Derek Jeter, those type of guys. If you're still a good player at 40, you must have been amazing at 25 or 30.
Right, yes.
But if you go look at Rich Hill was barely in the majors at those ages.
You're right.
He had control problems. He bounced around. He pitched for 1,000 different teams. Rich Hill didn't even get good until he was 30, basically.
Right, yeah.
And so for him to still be pitching at 43 is just one of the – and by the way, for 10 years now, he hasn't thrown 90 miles an hour.
19-year career.
Yes.
Career 4.01 ERA.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That's nuts.
Yeah. And much better in his 30s and 40s than he was in his 20s.
I believe that, yeah.
It's amazing.
1,405 innings.
Yeah. So anyway, I need Rich Hill to keep going for us old. Because now... we've reached the point where, the Vladimir Guerrero Juniors and all that stuff, that'll make you feel old, obviously. But we're at the point now where we're getting close to grandsons. For instance, I saw a video on Baseball America the other day that Prince Fielder's son, which would be Cecil Fielder's grandson, is a 16-year-old... projected first round pick 2 years from now in wherever he lives, high school in, I don't know, Texas or something like that.
Well, and I'm sure there's some grandsons playing guys that I was watching.
But you got Torrey Hunter Jr., you got all these Vladimir, we're old enough that, you're definitely, you're going to, well, you'll start to see.
I was just trying to think, if I was trying to do a similar comp, it would sort of be how many managers are younger than me?
Yeah,
or how many managers are older than me?
I joke about this with Baldelli, that thank God he'll always be a few months older than me. Because otherwise, it's I'm covering a manager who's young. But he's within a year of me, for sure. He certainly is a much younger spirit than me, but that's always been true.
Yeah, that's not hard.
When I was a kid...
I am a younger spirit than you.
When I was a kid, talking 13, my friends called me Papa Gleems because I acted like a grandfather.
That's right.
Where I'd be like, are we sure we want to go out tonight? Wouldn't it be better if we just stayed home and played Madden?
Yeah, maybe we just get some matzo ball soup.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't you think it's risky to smoke cigarettes? I know there'll be girls there, but don't you guys want to just... Anyway. So I need Rich Hill to keep going for us old folk. You're I wonder who the...
I wonder. I was going to say, how many managers are older than me?
Oh, a lot fewer than it used to be. Because
that'll be my similar comp. Is when will we get to the point where the last manager?
You still got Bruce Bochy's old ass is still there,
right? Yeah.
I'm trying to think who. Dusty Baker just retired.
Showalter's still around? No, he got fired.
Yes,
did he?
Angels. Did they hire him?
Oh, they I think it was the Angels.
But yeah, the prototype of a manager.
I hope Showalter's older than me. Jesus.
Oh, he's definitely older. John's only 70, so no. What are you? 56? You said
56.
Yeah. We shouldn't say this because now people are reconsidering their listenership to this podcast. Now that it's a 41-year-old and a 56-year-old. When
Buck Showalter's 67. I'm good.
You're saying. We got Bochy. I'm trying to think who else. Dusty was the oldest manager, I think, and he's retired.
Yeah.
But yeah, the prototype of like what teams look for in a manager now is the recently retired is viewed favorably.
Right.
Where it's like Baldelli and Kevin Cash and that type of player. I was just about to say one thing. Yeah, when we started this podcast, then we'll shut up. Which was, what did we say, 2012?
Yeah. So 2011. August of 2011.
2011. So I was August of 2011. That means I was, what does that mean? Wait, that was 12 years ago? So I was 28.
When we started the podcast?
28.
Okay.
And you were
let's see,
40.
I should be able to do this math. 13 minus me, so I was 43, something like that.
You were basically my age now.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's about right.
And I thought you were old as S back then, John. Now I recognize you were a young man of only 42 or whatever. But yeah, and when we
I
met,
need the White Sox to rehire Tony La Russa is what I need.
So the Twins want that too. The White Sox probably don't want it. Tim Anderson's gone, so maybe that's easier to do now. When we started,
Is he signed?
No, Tim Anderson is not signed.
Okay.
When we started blogging in 2002, that's when we first. I don't think we met in 2002, but we definitely met a year later, I would say. But when we started blogging in 2002,
winter of 2002, 2003, I think
that's when we met.
Yeah.
Okay. At Aaron's Baseball Blog and TwinsGeek.com.
Yeah. Right.
I was 19.
Yeah, I was 35
in 2002. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You were 6 years younger than I am now when you started blogging.
Yeah, that's right. Just look at all you've got ahead of you.
Yeah,
all I've accomplished.
I'm looking at it. It looks great. This is it. This is what I'm looking at the mirror. I don't know. As I say, John will dance on my grave. I'm sure of that. But he's going to have to wait in line. It's going to be a popular place. It's going to be the most popular dance club in the Twin Cities.
I'd probably maybe shuffle.
With your walker. Exactly. You're going to have to push Becky off so you can dance. There might be a couple of columnists on there. Lavelle might be on there that I'm making fun of him now today. Okay, that's it. Thank you guys for listening to us into the new year. I hope that the fact that our combined age now is nearing 100. That's when we should end the show, really. When our combined age is 100. That's only like a year.
It's like 3 years from now.
Not even
2 years from now.
Yeah.
Yeah, a year and a half from now, right?
Ooh, boy. We might need to bring in some young blood.
When
Who's the youngest person we know who can come in? Then we can average it out. We need like a 12-year-old so we can average age of like 30.
Yeah.
That would help, right?
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
I've got some writers.
John's always got a crop of sophomores in college who are pumping out content for this sweatshop he's running at Twins Daily.
Sure, that's right.
It's, okay.
Well, I mean, the MLB beat, the Twins beat isn't the oldest beat in the world either.
No, I was really upset when Bobby Nightingale joined. Great guy, but he's younger than me. I knew that.
Yeah,
it's closer than I thought, but he's younger than me.
Right.
Because somehow
you got Betsy.
I've known Doe now for like 20 years, and he's 25 years old still. Somehow. You know what I mean?
Exactly right. Yeah, right.
And here's what I think happened with Doe is I think he lied to everyone. And he inflated his age.
Yeah.
I know he did this with
he started to Stanford when he was 13.
See, I knew when I met him. It was good we putting this at the end because there's no way he's going to hear this. Right. But I knew when I met him that he graduated really early, that he was sort of he was a genius kind of. Yeah. But I didn't realize he graduated early with 2 degrees. Did you know that?
Yeah, I think so. Right.
So he has like a master's from Stanford also.
Right, yes.
And he got that and the regular degree by 20. Oh, I'm pretty sure.
That's crazy.
Because he started this job a year earlier than me. And like I said, somehow he's still 25. But my theory with Doe is that he inflated his age to us at first because he was really like 21.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm 23. And then the next year we go, how old are you, Doe? And he goes, 23. And then the next year, how old are you, Doe? 23.
Yep.
So now he's 25 for like the 4th time.
Yeah, right.
And I'm 200. Betsy at least hit 30. So that helps. Dan is old as shit. He won't be dancing on my grave. He'll be next to me.
He's a lot younger than me.
I know, but yeah, not mentally too. Yeah, he is.
He's closer to your age than he is to mine.
He's yeah, that's true.
Right, a lot closer, I think.
I'm counting on livers and kidneys holding up better for me. You know what I mean? Yeah, he's counting on blood pressure and heart holding up better for him.
I think his hip doesn't hurt every day. I'll tell you that.
That's probably true too. Roycey's going to outlive us all too, so that's the thing about that. He'll be dancing on my grave. Okay, this is a great way to end the first show of the year.
If you're yearning for more Gleeman the Geek, I don't know that we're doing an episode next Friday. I think we've got the 9th off.
Yeah, we're going to do one midweek this upcoming week on the Patreon side.
Yes, and it's going to be, I think, on the Twins minor leagues.
We'll talk some prospects. Maybe we'll do mailbag or something like that. We'll see. Or we got a big trade to talk about.
Maybe, we may have some emergency.
I've traded John for a college sophomore to be named later.
Maybe some winter meltdown details at the time. So check out the Patreon for sure. We will be doing that. We'll definitely be covering the process.
Thank you to HelloFresh
and to BetterHelp, our 2 sponsors. And we'll talk to you hopefully next week.
Gleeman